All right, what is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Libraries and Weight Rooms podcast. My name is DJ Ligori, and this is the show where we talk about how we can do hard things better through both mental and physical fitness. I want to welcome everybody to episode number 157, and I want to say thank you so much for tuning into today's show. Today, I want to talk about 5 different topics around the idea of an internal contract or a personal contract, right? The reason that I want to talk about this today is because I think a lot of the things that we talk about is around consistency and discipline. And I've said before that those two things are some of the loneliest games you'll ever play, and they're some of the most personal games you'll ever play. And I have a couple stories here that I want to share to show you how important thinking like this is and what it can really do to not only yourself, but also your life. And I want to hit on these 5 things and just kind of run through this idea of having a personal contract or almost like a personal standard of living. I heard this story once of Steve Jobs, and basically there was something that was being released on, I believe it was one of the Mac laptops. I know that they have like the MacBook Pro, the MacBook Air, all of those types of products. And I believe there was something being released on this Mac that was an internal component. So it was something that the consumer wouldn't even see. And Steve Jobs was like, we have to make sure we get this right. We have to make sure that, we fix this prior to launching this product in XYZ. And all of these people, I think, on his team were like, hey, this really isn't a huge pressing issue because this is something that the consumer is actually never even going to see. And Steve Jobs replied and said, but we will know. And the metaphor, or basically the lesson behind that answer, is that all of the consumers have no idea about this thing, right? This little deficiency, but the team at Apple will know about it, right? And so all of these people could be using this product, and then the Apple team could be watching all these consumers use their product, and in the back of their heads, they know, wow, little do they know that there's actually a component in there that we actually haven't resolved or fixed. And I heard this saying once that said that 75% is good enough. And basically in the context that I heard this was, say you're building a website or say you're building a landing page and you want to get this out into the world. And they said that 75% of it, once you have kind of that completion of it, get it out there into the world. And then as you find the places that you want to kind of fill that remaining 25%, slowly start to tweak it and slowly start to improve it. Yet 75% to us might be 100% to somebody else, right? They might not even see that 25% deficiency that we haven't necessarily completed yet. And I think this is such an interesting idea because this kind of wraps into the second point that I wanted to make about what I know versus what everyone else thinks. And I think the easiest way to explain this is to actually bring it to a CrossFit workout that I was doing a couple days ago. So I was doing this CrossFit workout, and it involved doing some ab mat sit-ups. And so basically the simplest way to understand an ab mat sit-up is it's this little kind of mat that you basically sit right in front of. So then you do a sit-up, your back is kind of curved. And then when you come back up for your sit-up, it's a little bit easier than actually just doing a sit-up on the ground. And so I was doing these sit-ups in the workout. I think we had to do like 50 ab mat sit-ups and go run and then do some V-ups. It was a very core intensive workout. And part of the ab mat sit-up is my hands actually have to come behind me and hit the floor, and then I come back up for the full sit-up. And there were a couple times where I went back and my hand didn't fully hit the floor, and I still came forward and did the whole sit-up. Now what I decided to do was I said, that's not a complete rep. It's not real in my head. So I would literally like have a miss rep or a no rep as they call it. And I would go back down and have to redo it. And I remember doing this exercise and thinking to myself, like, I could have easily just said, yeah, I was good. Right. But I would have known. And that discomfort is just enough pain and maybe guilt to go and do it again. And to go and make sure that I properly did the rep. Because at the end of the day, we actually keep our own score. And I was interviewing a guy a couple episodes ago, Ben Albert. And Ben was talking about how I believe he did jump rope every day for when he started getting into some more exercise and working out. And I think on some of the days he had said something like he would know if he had done the jump rope or not. Nobody else would necessarily know about it, but he would, right? And we talked about this importance of basically keeping our own score, or having this personal standard or this internal contract where this is a way of living that is just that I'm just going to know about. And I think what ends up happening is, and I've hit on this topic before, and I think it's just so important, is that when we end up operating in the way that we want to operate when nobody is there to watch us, it ends up changing what we think of ourselves, and I think what we think we're capable of, because we're not doing the behaviors for anything other than ourselves at that point, right? I could have very easily just kept doing those ab mat sit-ups and not hitting my hands on the floor, right? Nobody would have noticed, right? It's such a small movement and it's such a small nuance that nobody would even see it. But the fact of the matter is that I would see it. And I posted this video on my Instagram a couple days ago that was titled One Lazy Rep. And it was this video of what I believe was a wrestling coach who was talking to these young wrestlers and basically saying that one lazy rep is too many. Because if we do that once, if we have that one lazy rep of not touching our hands on the ab mat sit-ups, it becomes easier to do it again, because we've already proven to ourselves that we can do it. So now we already have evidence that it's a thing that we do. It becomes part of who we are, right? Hey, out of 10 reps, yeah, one of them is going to be lazy, right? Well, out of those next 20, now 2 of them are going to be lazy, right? And then maybe a little bit later on into the future, maybe 2 of them become lazy, right? Then maybe 3. And then this starts to become your new personal standard where it's like, no, I only actually do 70% of the things that I say I'm going to do. So I think having that awareness of, if I make this decision once, if I have this standard of knowing that something did not get done, or I did something in a insufficient way, or I did something half-assed, or something that I did was not to the expectation that I initially planned, and I'm the one that knows about it, that could become our new standard. That could become the new personal contract. And if we do that too many times, I think what's going to end up happening is we're going to get stressed and we're going to get anxious about the way that we're showing up in our lives, right? Because that standard is probably going to start dropping a little bit. And now imagine that standard getting carried over into your family, or that standard getting carried over into your fitness or your business or all of your relationships, right? Because we ultimately become the one pivot point that is attached to all of those. And so if our own personal standards start to drop, then they're going to start to drop in every other area. And so the fourth point that I want to make is, and I put this on my Instagram story a couple days ago, and I had a couple people comment on it, and I was really, really happy with the comments, like very inspiring. It said, who do you refuse to let down? And the majority of people commented on this, and they said that they refuse to let themselves down. And I think that's an indication of what people are willing to do when nobody's there to watch them, and who people are willing to be and how people are willing to act when it isn't for anybody else. And I think when it comes to validation, this is a very interesting point, because I think a lot of the times we act in certain ways to receive validation from other people. And validation is a very great feeling, right? Yet what about internal validation? Right? What about doing the extra ab mat sit up, right? What about Steve Jobs saying, hey, like, we know this thing is going to be off, right? Having those small little moments of internal validation and an internal standard can completely change the way that we show up in our lives, right? So who do we refuse to let down? Well, if we have this high standard of the way that we behave and the things that we do behind closed doors that isn't validation for other people, it's just validation for ourselves, maybe we refuse to let ourselves down, right? We refuse to let ourselves slip to that type of standard and that type of behavior and ultimately that type of life. So I like to call this the personal contract or the personal standard, right? This is something that you make with yourself and that you may never, ever share with anybody in your life ever. And in that episode, actually, with Ben Albert, he talked about the power of one more. And that's actually a book by Ed Milet called The Power of One More. And this is something that I do where after every single workout I do a push-up. And so no matter how hard the workout was, no matter how strenuous it was, no matter the duration or anything, I always will do a push-up after the workout. And that's just kind of like my requirement, right? My thing to kind of like end it. And it's this thing where it's like nobody really is going to see. It's one push-up. Nobody's really going to, like, one push-up isn't going to change the amount of the change that I got from that workout, right? The effectiveness of that workout. But it's just enough for me to remember that I did it. And like I said, the things that we do when nobody's there to watch us or nobody's there to critique us or criticize us or keep track of us, that's when we start to change. I seriously think that's where that self-image really starts to change into someone that we're truly proud of, and it's someone who we refuse to let down, which is ourselves. So take that idea, create your own personal contract, create your own personal standard, the way that you choose to live your life, and watch how you show up. So thank you guys so much for tuning into episode number 157 of the Libraries and Weight Rooms podcast. As always, if you got some value out of today's show, I'm always super, super grateful if you rate, review, and subscribe to all of the channels across Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. Always very grateful for any action you take regarding that area. So everybody have a great week. Keep doing hard things, both mentally and physically, and we'll talk to you guys soon.